He is, God, he has got so much damn potential.
He definitely does.
He's got so much potential.
But he comes back from every fight that he's had better, you know? I mean, when one of the most impressive ones was he knocked out Klitschko. Oh my God.
Klitschko's seen better days, though.
Another inconsistency in Anthony Joshua. I now understand, I believe having watched this, where Jake Paul is getting his confidence from. How he's built this narrative in his head that he genuinely has a chance. I think the thing to remember here, though, is that Anthony Joshua doesn't struggle against all smaller fighters.
This might be his last fight, getting in there with Anthony Joshua and getting knocked.
Joe Rogan and Mike Tyson break down the Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua fight, highlighting the differences between the fighters. Tyson emphasizes that Joshua must control his punches as Jake is not at his level. Rogan calls Joshua one of the scariest men in boxing, while noting the risk of Paul facing such a powerful opponent, especially considering Paul has only done exhibitions with retired or older fighters. The weight concept host explains that for
it's one of the craziest propositions of all time. You take a guy who just had a boxing match that looks like a sparring match with a 58-year-old Mike Tyson, and then you're going to fight one of the absolute scariest knockout artists in the heavyweight division. Maybe we should watch the Francis Ngannou fight so you could see. Let's watch that real quick, just so you can see what Anthony Joshua is capable if he's fighting someone that's not in his league. Okay, look, Usyk beat him, and he beat him twice, and Andy Ruiz caught him in the first fight and dropped him and stopped him. It was spectacular. Andy Ruiz is super fucking talented. Usyk is perhaps the great.
Getting knocked out by a single punch from Anthony Joshua is far safer than being hit repeatedly over 8 rounds. The reasoning is simple. Sustained punishment could cause serious injuries that extend beyond the ring. Even if Joshua is using smaller 10-oz gloves for this fight, a one-punch knockout, while dramatic, minimizes long-term harm and gives Paul a defined endpoint to the contest, reducing the cumulative risk of repetitive trauma. The host emphasizes that this dynamic changes the perspective on the fight, highlighting the danger in
There really is only one outcome that can hurt Jake in this scenario, and that's that he gets viciously knocked out, or he gets beat up really bad for 8 rounds and then viciously knocked out. I saw Nikisa talking on Ariel Helwani's show today about this, about like how it's not necessarily something they're worried about that Jake gets knocked out, because he's not afraid of the one-punch knockout as much as he's afraid of like Jake getting beat up for 8 rounds badly and it, you know, causing some real cognitive damage. And there is science behind the fact that the more repeated head trauma is the more dangerous thing about pro boxing, because those gloves, you can get hit, you get 8 to 10 seconds to stand, and you can repeat it 2-3 times in the same fight, just absorbing punch after punch. So in the totality of Jake getting like knocked out cold, is that the worst thing possible for his health? I mean, who knows, dude? You could have a freaking brain aneurysm when you get hit off one shot from a guy like AJ. Again, knock on wood, you don't want to see any of that happen. If his career ends because AJ hurts him badly, then yes. But if it's a knockout where Jake is able to then continue fighting, people will still watch. It may not be as big as the AJ fight, but he still has an opportunity to make money in boxing. Again, the only way it wouldn't be the case is if Jake got like permanently injured from this fight, which is part of the reason that they take this fight, is because Jake doesn't really have anything to lose here outside of, again, the bodily harm. You know, you fight a guy like Tommy Fury again, which I want to see, I think is more competitive, but doesn't bring the eyes that AJ does. So again, this is the entertainment business, and these Netflix fights are made for a massive audience. But you lose to Tommy Fury again, even by decision, that deflates Jake more than a knockout from Anthony Joshua. A loss to KSI deflates Jake more than a loss to Anthony Joshua. This is a perfect, even if Jake would have gotten just schooled by Gervonta Davis, it would have deflated him more than a knockout, I think. Yeah, it's a lot of risk, a lot of reward, but as far as your marketability, as
for Paul, despite the exhibition-like rules, for this matchup, Joshua has been required to use smaller 10-oz gloves. The adjustment is intended to balance the spectacle of the fight, making it more enticing to viewers and media, while also keeping the punch impact slightly controlled. Even with these gloves, the weight host stresses that the risk to Paul remains significant. Joshua's power is well documented, and the reduction in padding may increase the likelihood of knockout.
And, you know, Jake Paul being Jake Paul, he wanted to focus on the biggest, baddest names possible. That included Terrence Crawford. That included Ryan Garcia. That included Tommy Fury, that included Anthony Joshua. And we probably had, I don't know, 30 or 40 names that we kind of reviewed. And I will say at least 12 or 13 names that agreed to do the fight, some within the 2-week period, actually. But from a Netflix perspective, they were very keen on Joshua. They were interested on Crawford. They were interested in Ryan Garcia as potential opponents for Jake Paul. They were interested in Tommy Fury at some level as well. And the one that Jake gravitated towards was Anthony Joshua. Once it became clear Ryan couldn't do the fight as well, Ryan was also something that he was interested in doing. And the deal came together mostly because Jake mentioned this as of March of this year, right? That's the first time he was on a podcast and said, I think I can beat Anthony Joshua. Everyone laughed. At the time, Eddie Hearn said this is another, media attention-seeking moment for Jake Paul. I made it clear then to Eddie and to the media, Jake was serious and we wanted to do it in 2026. We had further conversations with Matchroom in July of this year with the understanding that if Jake got through Tank Davis, and even though that was an exhibition, it was very much structured to be a real fight in every way, shape, and form, then we would look to make Jake versus Joshua in 2026. So that gave us a head start in terms of trying to come to an agreement with Matchroom and AJ, and we were able to get it done.
I just want to ask about a couple of those names that you mentioned. Garcia's interesting because a day or so later, Oscar De La Hoya said he's a DAZN fighter, this ain't happening, and of course we know there's no...
The gloves are a technical change, but they do not remove the fundamental disparity in strength, skill, and experience between the two fighters, ensuring that every punch carries serious consequences. Nikiza Badarian explains the reasoning behind choosing Joshua as Paul's opponent. Because the fight is being documented for Netflix, the organizers needed a matchup that would create maximum visual and narrative impact. They had to consider several factors.
I think that this has been a misstep from Jake. I think he wanted to make his partners at Netflix a little too happy, and he's gonna walk into it. But look it, he loses to AJ. Where does he go from here? Who does he fight? You're gonna go back down to 135?
The problem is not that he loses to AJ. The problem is the way he's gonna lose to AJ might be life changing.
Right.
So that's the real issue.
It could be life changing in many ways, right? Physically.
Yeah.
See what he did in Nagano? It's like, but then again, if he gets knocked out, he gets knocked out.
Including fighter profiles, media appeal, and audience expectations. Anthony Joshua met these criteria perfectly. He's a recognized world champion with international acclaim, making the bout highly marketable. His presence elevates the stakes, creating a storyline that is compelling for both viewers and promotional partners. The Netflix documentation amplifies every aspect of preparation and the fight.
Jake now, I wouldn't consider him like a YouTube fighter no more. I feel like he put in the time. He gotten better throughout all his fights. He done got better throughout all those fights, But it's still when you fighting fighters who actually done it for their whole life, it's a little different. If that fight happened, it'll be a good money fight. It'll be a good money fight. But that's a tough task for, Jake going to get that big ass heavyweight AJ. I know AJ personally, so that's tough.
Ryan Garcia discusses the potential life-changing impact on Jake Paul if he loses. He points out that Joshua's power is not to be underestimated and that a defeat could affect Paul not only in the immediate physical sense, but also in terms of reputation and career trajectory. The experience could be transformative, highlighting the immense challenge Paul faces. Garcia emphasizes that Joshua's punching power and skill make this fight a serious test, and the consequences of failure are tangible. Training, preparation, and awareness are critical for Paul to navigate the risks that Joshua's presence in the ring presents. Frank Martin notes that while the fight promises substantial financial rewards, it remains a very tough challenge for Jake Paul. Money alone does not mitigate the risk, and Paul should have carefully considered the dangers before committing to the bout. Martin stresses that this is not just a money fight, but the stakes are real and the physical challenge is significant.